It's worth doing a short review because a lot of misinformation is coming out at the moment about the riots and about the response to the riots, including somebody being charged for playing music, including ideas that the Prime Minister, like Dominic Raab, is on holiday. Not true. And the riots have been dogged by misinformation and inflammatory rhetoric spread on social media, particularly following the stabbing in Southport on July the 30th. And this tragic event, where 3 young girls were killed, was falsely attributed to a Muslim immigrant, despite the suspect being a local with no links to Islam at all, a churchgoer, and a music theatre performer. The role of various public figures and influencers in exacerbating the situation. What's extraordinary about this is it hasn't changed the narrative to get his name out there, to get facts about his background out there. It's not changed the narrative because the narrative is spun by these individuals, some of whom don't even need to open their mouth because their influence is so significant. They have passed from reality into mythology, particularly Tommy Robinson. There is this known far-right activist who falsely claimed on social media that the attacker was a Muslim, which contributed to the mob's anger. He defended the violent actions of the rioters, describing them as justified. But, pursue Tommy Robinson? That doesn't decapitate the problem. Put him in prison? That makes him a martyr like Julian Assange. And somebody said that I've become some sort of defender of Yaxley Lennon. I'm not a defender of his. I just think that the police time is better spent doing something of value. Andrew Tate, the controversial influencer, the 4 times favourite kickboxer, also played a critical role. He posted misleading information suggesting the attacker was an illegal migrant, which further fueled public outrage. Tate's comments were viewed by millions, amplifying the spread of false narratives. Nigel Farage, leader of the Reform UK party, was accused of stoking tensions by questioning the truthfulness of the information released in dribs and drabs by the authorities. His comments drew criticism from various people in the political sphere who accused him of irresponsibly inflaming public sentiment. Of course, they're right. Other figures such as Lawrence Fox, David Atherton, contributed to spreading false information or inflammatory remarks. I expected better of some of these people. For instance, Fox made derogatory comments about Islam and suggested a need for drastic actions against Muslim communities. Similarly, Atherton shared incorrect information about the suspect, which he later apologised for. But the information is out there. That's the problem. The Southport, an apology is irrelevant. Who cares about Atherton? I hardly know who he is. Like Isabel Oakeshott. She's another person who's been fingered for being involved in stirring up, in instigating riots. I've seen this very interesting post from some 5 pillars saying the top 10 online instigators of the far right riots in the UK. One of them, Ashley Simon. Who is she? Who cares? Paul Golding. I know who he is. Calvin Robinson. He and I have had words. And this misinformation campaign, largely driven by far-right figures, led to bolder and broader unrest, with instances of violence reported in other cities like Liverpool, Hull, Bristol, and these events underscore the dangerous impact of disinformation and the need for responsible and thoughtful communication. Overall, these riots reflect a broader rising of xenophobia, an anti-immigrant sentiment across the UK, exacerbated by online misinformation and the actions of influential public figures who speak, and then in some cases they speak and then they try and take back their words or contextualize. It's not possible. Once those words are out there, they're out there. And in the same way, pursuing some of those people endlessly, like the pursuit of Tommy Robinson, has a negative effect. It has the opposite effect. Rather than diminishing his influence, it makes it bigger. As for Farage and Tice, both of them have put their neck out rather further than they should have done, and they have a responsibility as elected politicians, and they should be calling for unity rather than... Farage has written a letter which has been posted on Tice's Twitter feed, saying how much he deplores the violence. But it was Farage asking these pointed questions designed to propel people onto the streets. Darren Grimes is another one of these people. I despair of this level of influence. I remember when I first came across this word influencer, and I couldn't get in my head round the idea about whether or not it was influencer or instigator or effluent. And now I know it's influencer, but instigator is definitely a word which is appropriate to many of the people who have been pushing at the edge of this movement, and they must be held responsible. I have previously tried to find. I've previously argued that Tommy Robinson should be just left in peace, but I'm not convinced that's the case now. I still think pursuing him is a waste of police money and a waste of police time, and the longer he is pursued, the more the more significant he becomes. But I think the level of damage which has been done is astronomical. This is not simply about the pursuit of one person. This is not simply about a small amount of information. This is about a barrage of hate. And the people who are rioting in the streets also need to be held absolutely responsible. I was talking to someone this morning who was saying how police are going through footage frame by frame to identify people who've been rioting. It's the right thing to do. But it's not. We need to change the way our society is working. We need to be more positive about integration. This requires an effort on the education front as well as tightening up existing legislation and using that existing legislation. But the divisions of our society can also be laid at the feet of people like Suella Braverman, Kemi Badenoch, Robert Jenrick, and I think also ultimately Theresa May. The hostile environment to make things difficult, to disinvite people. These are not part of the British character. And it's taken a long time. But I think in many ways, this summer is a consequence of so much negative language which has been used over the last 20 years. And it doesn't just start with Theresa May. It goes all the way back to the last Labour administration. It is pernicious, and it is dehumanizing, and it is fundamentally wrong.